Hey everyone, it's Louisa Munson from Feel Good Astrology, and I had the pleasure of meeting up with Smita Joshi very recently, and we had this really beautiful chat where we kind of like started off, trying to exploring, not trying to, but exploring the parts of Smita's life that might have brought spirituality to the fore. And through this whole conversation, we kind of went full circle, actually. But for part of it, we were really talking of how you can be more of who you are, how you can bring that out in yourself. And so part of this talk actually is dedicated to that part of the interview. If you'd like to watch the whole interview, then if you just go back to my YouTube channel and search for it under Smita Joshi, you'll find it straight there. Anyway, however you choose to listen into the knowledge and sharing between me and Smita, I really just hope you enjoy it. Let's bring her on now, shall we? So it's absolutely my great pleasure to bring on my guest today. And my guest is Smita Joshi. Hi, how are you?
Hey, Louisa. So nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, it's lovely to connect again. It seems like we've been in and around each other's circles for quite some time. And yet it's only recently that we've got the chance to talk. And now I've got this opportunity to talk with you and to learn more about you as a person and your motivations and how you have come to really live your authenticity. And that's what I'm really keen to know about. So thank you so much for agreeing to let me interview you today.
Oh, thank you, Louisa. Yeah, I knew your husband well before I knew you. I think, well, at least well before I knew you. I may even have known him before you did.
You did. You absolutely did.
Yeah, he was one of my guides in doing my first audio recordings because he was so prolific in his. It was like, I don't know how many years ago. Must have been maybe 12 years ago or something. He was really prolific in podcasting and so on, and he knew so much about how to set up audio and things. So he was my go-to guy.
Yeah, he's definitely my go-to guy now. He's
for me, just the audio, Louisa.
That's absolutely fine. I mean, it's funny because, talking about that, like back in those days when you met Carl, that was back when he was doing the Barefoot broadcast, and it seemed a little ahead of its time. He was interviewing light workers, healers, authors, anyone that had a really good feeling vibe, anyone that was doing good in the world, that was sharing their light, helping others connect with their light. And of course, there you are on his radar. So you've been doing a lot of real beautiful light work for many, many years. And I guess what I'd like to know is how did you get into it in the first place? What was it that drew you there? Was there a key moment in your life where you knew that there was something in you that, I don't know, that was wanting to work in transformation? How did that occur for you?
I mean, there have been obviously many, many critical moments where the connection becomes stronger. But I think the first one, if you want to go right the way back, the first one that I remember is when I was 7. Uh-huh. And when something had just happened in my life, and it was quite a shock. And I sat in front of, so in India, children were all brought up. So we have a shrine at home. So we have a little sort of area where we sit in the morning and evening, and we do our prayers and we do our mantras. And, it's a moment, those moments of grounding and connecting, setting up your day and closing your day. But it was a foundational practice. So when you're a child, you do what you're told. And you kind of do the mantras, the japa, the malas, and do all of that. So I remember that day I was really upset. I sat there, and I really didn't understand why the world was the way it was. And I kind of had a conversation with God, and I said, "You're just not real. Like if you were real, you wouldn't let the things that are happening around me happen around me. You just wouldn't do it. You're just made of clay." And so there was this big booming voice. Now I have to tell you that it wasn't in my imagination. Mm-hmm. It was something one of those phenomena that actually happened. I looked around to see if, who was that. I thought, well, my dad had come home, or it was so like a big echo.
Yeah.
And there was nobody outside. So because I then closed my eyes and there it was again. And I saw this big hand, and I saw a little girl in the hand, and the hand was moving like it was a flying carpet.
Wow.
And it said to me, you are well taken care of. You have a big purpose here. You have a big purpose here. You're well taken care of. And that was it. So it was just said, you're well taken care of. You have a big purpose here. And all I saw was this massive hand with a little girl in it. So I suppose the little girl was supposed to be me, but I still remember it to this day. So there was this big hand, like with a little girl in it. And it was like a flying carpet, magic carpet flying across space. And just that voice, there was just something about the whole experience that just really penetrated into my cells. It calmed me down. And not only that, but you have to remember, I'm only 7 years old and I'm very, very sensitive. And I felt this explosion of light up my body, up my spine, and it was like, wow, it was this magical event that happened. And at that point, it was like that voice, I knew that was a very important voice. That was a voice I felt connected to.
Yeah.
And then I kept, it was a voice that was calming, and it was a voice that I trusted. So it was the very first time that I had that experience in my life, in a very, very critical moment. And that was the very first time. And then this voice would show up, this experience of being connected. There would be this dialogue sometimes, and it would show up, but it would only really show up when there were, when I was upset, or when I felt traumatized, or when there was something, that was exceptional. So as I grew older, that happened at times. It was like my inner guidance. It was my guidance system. It was something that was there that talked to me, that I could talk to, that I've really completely trusted. And so when I was working in companies and, in hardcore sort of corporate environments and, fast paced, high pressure work, it was a lot of fun. But it was also something where I needed to come home to, like to my shrine, to my flat, my sanctuary. And when I would sit down to meditate, I would want to experience, like I'd want to invoke that experience again. And I found that I couldn't yet do it at will. So I spoke to it and I said, but why can't I just talk to you when I want? Why can't you come and talk to me? Like, when I don't need to, when there's no stress, when there's no trauma. I like that because I miss that connection. So that's when I started to sit down and sort of invite it in my meditation. That was my way of meditating, was just sitting down, closing my eyes and just getting quiet, and then hoping that something would happen there where I would be able to somehow connect to that same experience of oneness. And so that's how I taught myself to meditate. And that's how I taught myself to stay sane in my crazy, crazy work life.
Wow. That's a very strong experience to have as a 7-year-old. Having a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old right now, I can't imagine how they would react to that. And I can only maybe put myself in the same position. And I had experiences like, not exactly like that, but not at that age. I was very, very young. And so that experience has continued with you. And like you say, you've integrated the experience of it into your meditations, and you're open to invite it in. How was it that you ended up working in big business? I'm wondering, like if the guiding light that you connected with, did it allow you to go off and do the worldly things first? Or, how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, even today, there are these various facets, it's a bit like that crystal behind me. It's like there are these various facets that I am very aware of, that I have given an expression to. And they're just as much that I think my purpose, there was a point at which I wanted to give up working. There's a point at which it was getting really difficult. I wasn't making my numbers, and the people that I worked, also the work that I was doing, it was in technology, it was leading edge, but it just wasn't exciting and juicy enough for me. Yeah. And rather than look for another job, at that point I was wondering, should I, shouldn't I, what should I do next? And that was when I ended up asking the question, like, what am I here for? Like, what am I really going to do? What am I really here for? Yeah. And, you got to tell me, because this is excruciating, not knowing. Yeah. And, I need to know. And so it said to me that your purpose, and again, this was the second time when I heard this booming voice, because it was such a strong question on my part. The answer came in as an equally loud, clear way, and it said, your purpose is to integrate the spiritual and the material, the inner and the outer, the material and the inner wealth and outer wealth, and you need to do that for yourself before you can do it with anybody else, or you can talk to anyone else about it. So that's what there is for you to do. Because so I had these like different facets. One was the kid at school, who sold, bubble gum, imported bubble gum that my uncles brought me, and so that I could, instead of having so I could go and buy some fruit, or the lunch that my grandmother made. Occasionally I go and sell to older kids, because I really wanted that exotic fruit that was outside. So that was already there for me. That was already in my DNA. Yeah. And this business person, that whole living in the world, that challenge of create. It's more about the challenge for me. It's more about you tell me I can't do something, I will do. So that's why I ended up in always in those roles where people hadn't, they would fight. So in the end, I ended up specializing in doing the kind of work where you had to break ground into new areas, into new companies, or into companies that we weren't successful in before. So that's where I really excelled. So it's just another expression of myself. I don't separate that from the other side of me, the meditative, because for me, one feeds the other. So the inner sort of guide, the meditation, the intuition, the listening to that inner voice. Where shall I go? When shall I make that call? Who shall I call? Everyone is saying you got to go and talk to him now. This is the CEO of this bank or something. I'm saying no, now is not the time. You got to wait. And then when I do have that, it might be at 6 a.m. I end up making a call, and there he is, getting in early to do something, answering the phone because he thinks it's somebody else. And boom, I'm in, right? So it really works like that. So it's like being in that, learning to listen. For me, the challenge has really I suppose the really interesting thing about work is listening to that. When to do, what to do, how to do, who to go to, who to speak to, who not to speak to. And, just really being in tune with that, but also really sharpening the intellect. So you can really do that job it's like magic, so the inner and the outer fuse together, and it is a potent combination. So I'm not saying, it's always about for me, it's very much, I love the intellect. I love sharpening, honing my skills, whether it's writing or whether it's writing proposals or books or articles, they're all different, whether it's in, languaging things like communication, for having relationships work, for eliciting, effectiveness in business or in personal lives, it's just a skill. It's just like this real, I would say it's not even a commitment. It's more like a love, a passion for excellence and for, mastery. And self-mastery is obviously the first place, it's obviously the first place to start, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also what I'm hearing is innovation as well, because like you said, you've always been at the cutting edge of technology, at the leading edge. And I think, to be there, you have to be 1 or 2 or possibly 10 steps ahead, because of an intuitive but also innovative mind. So yeah, I also hear innovation as well as mastery. And also that deep reverence and ability to listen really, really deeply. And I can totally see that scenario, where that CEO is at his desk at 6 a.m. because, having worked in London and worked for blue chips and stuff myself, I know that they often get there really, really early, and they answer the phone because they just don't have their PAs there fielding it. So I think that's genius what you've done there.
Well, I think that for all of us, Louisa, my perspective is that I think for all of us as human beings, the real purpose of life is to be able to listen, clearly to what is unseen. In other words, we think that the body and the mind and what we know, and maybe a little bit of what we don't know, but we know that we don't know. So it's a very small boundary, right? But the real stuff of innovation, of creativity, of genius, and actually of self-mastery lies in that other space of not knowing what you don't know.
Yes.
You don't know that you don't know it. And that's always like pushing the boundaries of consciousness. So like ways of bringing that a little bit closer and going a little bit further into that space, a little bit more and a little bit more. But you can only do so in sort of what in business language used to be called step changes. It's not like a quantum leap. Sometimes you make a quantum leap, but it can be scary if you're not used to it. So for me, what is the purpose of life for us as human beings is really to grow into becoming more and more of the unseen aspect of who we are. So that is what the ancient rishis of India called, the sages of India. Thousands of years ago, they'd already got it sussed. Those dudes were amazing. They already knew. They said, that space is Atman. That is Atman. Now, there's a drop of that. There's a tiny piece, a fragment of that that's landed in your body that you call you, which is the Jivatman, which is the one that's alive. Jiv means life. It means life. Yeah. I mean, being alive. That is the part of you that is actually embodied. But the rest of you is out there because it's just way too big to be actually poured into the body. Some people can draw more aspects of that into themselves by clearing away the toxicity and by, preparing themselves for receiving, being a bigger receptor of that, right? And we think those people are like gods, those beings are like, wow, there's so many. But actually what they've done is they've enabled, while being in a human body, to become capable of receiving and holding more and more of that consciousness. So they're a few steps ahead of us. And therefore we think, wow, that's amazing. How is that possible? So, I mean, in the autobiography of a yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda talks about, he shares about all these amazing yogis who through their sadhana, through their practices, through what we call tapas is heat, they have burnt away the toxicity of, and they've managed to become, allow more of that, let's call it consciousness for the Atman, let's just say, that field of Atman, that field of consciousness, they've opened up a little bit more to it. So they can actually manifest, items, objects just by being, or they can teleport themselves from one place to another. It's completely possible. It's just a question of becoming, because I think we're about maybe 5% of who we are is in the body, maybe 10 if you're really lucky, and the rest of us, and I mean, varies according to the person. And the rest of us is really, really available. It's just that it's a very shy presence, a very quiet presence. It's an unimposing presence. The what we call the observer, the witness. It's just there. And if we open up enough to it, then it's available. And that's for me really what I think is for all of us to clear away enough of our nonsense, the stuff, to be able to be at peace with ourselves long enough to just let that voice, sneak through, and we kind of go, oh, what was that?
I love your description, because as you were talking about the quiet, silent observer, and how you have to clear away some of your kind of nonsense that's going in the background, it brought to mind my granddad, or a small recalcitrant child that's a bit shy, because with those types of people who are slightly more reserved, they don't just speak like, freely. They wait for real silence, almost like you're playing chicken. Sometimes you have to sit with them in silence, knowing that at some point they're going to be called into action. And so I guess, maybe there's a fearless side of ourselves that is silent. It can be a courageous act to kind of clear ourselves, or be empty, or be present to that silent voice. Able to do that as a 7-year-old, presumably to have heard who are you calling that, the voice of God?
I called it a diamond at the time, because it felt like this explosion of lights and diamonds. And that's what I refer to in my book. So the karma and diamonds aspect of it, that one of the plural diamonds is the inner diamond. That is what the rishis called, the sages called Atman. That is that consciousness, So I don't know what that was at the time. I never really paid, as a kid, you don't hang around long enough to kind of, you don't think about it, you move on. But as I grew up, and when it was there more and more, that was just something that I started to question. What was it? Was it an embodied being? Was it a disembodied spirit? Was it actually the voice of a deva, being of light? What was it? And I suspect it was probably just my higher consciousness talking to me in a way that I, as a little girl, would respond to. Yeah. So I don't know, and it's interesting that it was, I'm just in deep gratitude. Receive it. I probably just let it be. I'm not like, as much as I love to get into analyzing things and taking things apart, there are just some things I just know.
Yeah,
they're just a part of my knowing life, and I don't need proof myself, because this particular aspect of me has taken me without any external guidance or mentorship from anywhere else at times when I really, really needed it. That's been the guiding voice for me. So that's been the guiding go-to. That's where I went to when everything fell apart, and that's where I got my source myself from. So I trust it more than I trust the voice of my intellect.
Yes, I hear you. I completely hear you there. There's so much in what you've just shared that I'd love to pick up on and talk further on. But I don't know where to start, actually. I guess when you were talking, like, if or when I fall apart, that's the voice I trust the most. That sort of presence, and it's that sense of knowing that you have got, that you don't need to look outside of yourself for the answers, but the answers come deep within yourself. Is that what led you to the physical practice, like the expression of yoga? Because you've been talking about the polarities of things, the outer world, the inner world, the business, the spiritual, I guess spirit and mind and body, because it's not just business that you're doing it either, is it?
No, that's exactly it. It's just, that's the real challenge, is like, how can I make life? How can I produce results? How can I do amazing things? What now the law of attraction calls manifesting. Well, I was kind of, this is that, this is really listening to that voice and getting out of my own way with my identity, with my ego, with all those other aspects. For me, that's really what life is for, is to become that master of being able to call forth, yes, those aspects of you that you can evolve in the world. Because, because, for example, cooking, I love cooking, right? So it's just anything that's creative, I will do it. And so reading, writing, cooking, talking, anything. And, all these things need you to become skilled. You need to pay attention to the science behind it. You know, it's not something that I mean, there are certain things that just flow out of you. It's true, but there's so much pleasure in learning and honing your craft and your skill. So that's the science element of that. But then there's the other side of that, which is trusting, you know, how much of a certain spice to put in, or how much of a certain anecdote to give, or how much of a thing to share, and how much, you know, all of those things. You know, you've got to listen to that. But deeper than that, even, it is, you want to live a life that's truly true to yourself. So, you know, what does that mean? I think that means really listening to that. The self we're talking about is not the egos, the self in the body that has, you know, come here with all the lashes on the back, you know, and that's made some very, 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 I would say, mistaken conclusions, you know, as a result of the pain that we all go through. Yeah. But the self that is beyond all of that, that self, that pure, that self which has, you know, the clarity, the thing that says, you know, but if you do this, but not this, you're going to have so much fun. You know, it's going to be great. You're going to be great at it. It'll be a challenge, but you're going to love it. And when you come out the other side, you know, you've actually touched your soul. You've come doing those things that you love to do because it puts you in touch with your soul. That soul is really a very Christian word, but it puts you in touch with Atman. It puts you in touch with that aspect of you that is listening, that is observing, that's clear, that's transparent, and that is expansive, is free. And that's when you experience all those qualities along the way. And that's why we love doing those. So I think in what you're saying, it's really, I always come back to that. It's about being true to that self. And the journey is to clear away enough of what the rishis call the shad ripus. Shad means 6. Ripus are the enemies. These are the inner enemies. So there is Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Mad, Matsarya. They're the 6 Sanskrit words. Kam is the desires that we have. These are the desires that, it's not about don't have desires, but it's about choose your desires well. Because look, you won't do, now if that thing that you're doing is coming from a deeper part of you, and it takes you forward in a way where there's joy and peace, and yes, it's hard work, but it feels like you're falling off a log and you love it, then that's something worth pursuing, right? So the calm is all about being in the web of the kind of desires that drive you. You know, so really they're talking about sort of addictions. Sexual addictions to substances, addictions to people, you know, relationships, all of those things that actually have you sell out on yourself. So that's the calm side. Krodh is all aspects of anger and stress and frustration and all of those things that really blind us, you know, from seeing clearly. And then so calm, Krodh, Lobh is, you know, all those things which are around greed and miserliness, you know, the things that take away your generosity, all these things. So that aspect of you that is the observer, that witness, that, you know, that whole true essence of who you are, that is just nothing but abundance and generosity. But the moment you get attached to I need to be this, or I need to have this much money, or I will keep it to myself. You know, there's an inheritance, but I'm not going to give it to my cousins, brothers, or whatever that is, you know, and so on. So, or even being miserly, you know, so being miserly, those things that they take you out. So they blind you. Again, they blind you from seeing the real clarity of your essence and coming from that. And then more, these are the attachments that we have to other people, and those attachments are all about, again, you know, in relationships we think, you know, my mom, my dad, my people, you know, my husband, but you're in that process, what you do is you end up imprisoning them in having to behave in a certain way so that they and you have, can be just okay for each other to be around, right? And so what that does is that clips your wings, because you have to, again, sell out on who you truly are. You do. Look, it doesn't matter how much, unless in that relationship, both of you have arrived in a place of wholeness in your own individual selves, and then you come together, then you completely get that, because they happen to, the fact that they're in your life is just a cherry on the ice cake. They're not there to make you happy. They're not there to serve your needs or demands or to make you whole or anything. But by virtue of being together, yes, you do discover another level of wholeness that can only happen because the two of you are together,
Yeah.
So in fact, what it does is in a relationship that is not bound by Maya or more, is one which is free, that it creates like endless freedom for you to be. You go as high as you can in your life, you experience as much joy individually and then together. But what it does is it truly magnetizes you to each other. So in a sense, it's kind of paradoxical that where it's not coming from that control of you have to be this or you have to behave this way, and if you're not like that with me, then I'm not, you're not my sister or my friend or whatever it is that goes on. Thankfully, I don't have brothers and sisters, so I don't have to deal with that side of things. But so there's that. Then the mother side of things is where it talks about arrogance, that pride that we have. So as soon as you get into having a tiny amount of knowledge or a tiny amount of enlightenment, there's like, look at me, I know more than you do, and that's a trap. That's a trap, so you got to, or any kind of success in life, and then it does again blind you to your humility, to your teeny weeniness on the in the nature of the cosmos, and in the bigger picture of the cosmos, and then Matsarya is really jealousy, envy, all those things. So these 6 things are the Shadripus, the Rishi said, and they so nailed it. We don't need to look anything outside of that. We don't need neuroscience or anything. What we do need neuroscience for is to understand that your brain is constantly learning and evolving, and if you allow it to. And so clearing away, what is there to clear away? Clearing away is the clearing away of the illusion that has arisen from all of those things, and the perspective of the small, the identity, which is very limited. So when someone does something, my mother did this or my dad did that or whatever, the conclusions we come to, that's what there is to clear away. So we can really just be truly like in our freedom, be free to breathe.
That must be incredible to be like that. I mean, I can see where those 6 enemies have played out in my own life, and growing up with a sister, I could definitely see the jealousy thing coming up for sure.
And isn't it really crazy? There's always the people who are closest to us, like in our environment, whether it's close friends or people that we have this idea that they are the people who should be happy for us when we do well, or when we have something great happen or whatever. Yeah, it's often not the case, right? It's often not the case.
Yes, because for a lot of people, I guess the attachment to others plays in, because as you start to rise up, the other person who you're very close to may well feel deserted or left behind or superfluous. So you both have to be doing it together. I can totally see that. Or like, I mean, I know lots of couples, you end up having one that supports the other. And so unless they're experiencing joy from supporting and raising themselves through being supportive, that could get a bit sticky as well. But I wrote all those enemies down while you were talking. And actually, without the addictions, you would have a sort of very generous nature. Without the anger, you'd have joy. Without greed, you'd have peacefulness and generosity and sharing and humility and what's coming up is this like identikit of how to connect to your soul. Is it sounds really beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing that. I love that. See, this is the stuff that I think should be taught in schools or taught in families, and yet it's our stories are the things that are taught and repeated to us, aren't they? They're the things that seem to take precedence. Like we when my kids don't go to school. Actually, we're trying to unlearn them a little bit. But I remember going to school and being taught history, because this is how it happened, and this is what's going on, and this is what religion is, and this is what geography is, and your whole world is kind of mapped out for you in such a way that you could be forgiven for feeling that there's nothing new to learn. So I love the fact that what you're speaking of here is that there is this endless curiosity and opportunity and possibility, and that in practicing this comes the natural manifestation. Because actually, also what I notice is all of these enemies have one thing in common, and that's scarcity. That we live in a world of lack.
Yeah.
And of course, that's what creates competition and all sorts of different things that leave us all feeling less than in some way.
Well, I think what leaves us feeling less than is not really knowing who you are. So when you haven't explored, when all there is the person that you are walking around as a product of all of the environment, the past, what people have told you, the stories that you have somehow absorbed by osmosis and inherited from your environment and from our ancestors and whatever, those types of things they're the web. They're the web of karma.
Yes.
That actually is the name of my second book in the trilogy, in the Karma and Diamonds trilogy, is the Web of Karma. So it's really that if you don't have that sense, or if you don't go looking for that deeper essence of who you are, even though we are all of us coming from, as it were, the Pacific Ocean of consciousness, but that little drop, or that which we individually each are for ourselves, that has evolved in its own way through its own journey and experiences, and that's quite unique as well. And that's not the same. So no two drops are the same. And so I think what there is to, if you don't really make the effort to look inside and to inquire, and some people are not really interested because it's not their journey in life. They landed on this planet this time, in this particular incarnation, to actually experience being present now, to do the material things, to not question, because they've done that maybe in other lifetimes. But, so we also can't sort of dismiss that as a valid way of being. But it will leave you, if you don't have a sense of rooting and connecting into something which is, as the rishis call it, eternal, unchangeable, and timeless, that is that aspect of you, then it's really like a little piece of wood floating on that Pacific Ocean with nowhere to go, it feels really daunting. So all there is then to be envious or jealous, or to compare yourself to other people, or and think that when they do something, they're doing it to stick it to you or something, when they're really, they might just be following their own heart, their own journey, which you may never understand, because the perspectives are so different. It's a bit like they're speaking Japanese and you're speaking in Tamil or some other language. There's just the cultures are different, the perspectives are different.
So I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. It was wonderful connecting with Smita after, really wanting to connect with her for so long. So if you would like to get in contact with Smita, if you'd like to work with Smita, or learn more about how she can help and work with you, then just go to her website. It's smitajoshi.com. That's SMITAJOSHI.com. And I think you can also connect with her on Instagram. In fact, if you do a search for her, it will show you exactly where she is. If you find these conversations interesting, uplifting, enlightening, and want more of them, then just subscribe to my channel. It's really easy to do. It's Louisa Tanner Munson on YouTube. You can also use hashtag feelgoodastrology or hashtag Louisa Munson, and hopefully that'll also connect you. I like using Telegram. You can find me on Facebook. Insta, I'm not very good at, but yeah, you can contact with me and keep up to date with me. Obviously, if you want to work with me, it's louisa@feelgoodastrology.com, and you can also go directly to my site, www.feelgoodastrology.com. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.